Hey guys, Andrew Shroud. I'm here on the sideboard. I'm sitting with Feline Longmore. How's it going?
It's going okay so far.
Okay so far.
I'm realistic.
Sitting at 7-2 at the end of day one.
Correct.
With Solidarity?
With this deck right here. I'm not playing the usual build. I am playing Solidarity, which is Reset Tide, technically.
She's playing a deck based around giving creatures +0/+5.
There are creatures in the list.
So to fill in here, Solidarity, of course, is a high tide deck that's based around Reset.
That is correct.
I don't really understand why it's called Solidarity. Maybe you do.
I don't remember the specific story. I was told at one time.
Okay.
But it has something to do with being in the sideboard of a deck, and the deck, they just had it in there for the slot, and then the actual deck was like a mono blue combo deck that milled the opponent, and they just named it Solidarity because of that, and they did good enough that it stuck, and that's why conversation's happening right now.
Right, okay. Well,
I don't know who did it or how long ago, I don't remember.
I'm already
I'm
confused,
sorry.
so I'm going to keep calling it Reset High Tide.
I'm okay with that.
All right, so for those of you that don't watch the Open Series regularly, that haven't seen a high tide deck in action before, fill us in really briefly, like what a high tide deck does and how it works.
It's an engine combo deck. Long story short, it's a mill deck. You want to produce mana, abusing high tide and untap effects, and along the way, you increase your storm count, and you cast a number of draw spells, and you eventually get to a point to where you can Blue Sun Zenith for lethal or Brain Freeze for lethal, depending on what you're going against, and that's as simple as it gets.
Okay.
Because it's not simple.
Right. All right. So you've played a lot of high tide. You've mostly played the Time Spiral version, but you've shown up with the Reset version today. And talk to us a little bit about why you chose to play Reset and really what Reset does for this deck.
Reset allows you to go off on your opponent's turn. It's much cheaper to cast. You can do it in response to them tapping out, casting a draw spell. And Dig Through Time is the reason why this deck has gotten a boost. It hasn't had a big finish yet, but I decided to try it myself. As much as I love Time Spiral, there are some perks and some advantages to playing it over the normal Spiral Tide version list. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going for it.
Okay, so what are those perks? Like what?
The element of surprise.
Sure.
Some people don't know or even realize what's going on until I mill them in response to a Jace Brainstorm or a Ponder. You can actually cast Dig Through Time before you start comboing because it only costs 2. Then you can, if you have Reset or High Tide, you can get the other one. Then with the third land, you can cast High Tide. With the fourth one, you can cast Reset and go. And you can do that before even casting the first High Tide, which is nuts. And that's happened a couple times. Dig Through Time allows you to keep the draw 7 one-sided. You only draw 2, but it's the best 2 of 7. So you don't give them a new 7.
Okay.
And you can go for Brain Freeze, so you don't have to get as much mana for Blue Sun Zenith, so it can be faster as well.
Okay.
There's a lot of other things I'm probably forgetting. There's probably like 15 reasons why I'm doing it, but I do know those are out there.
Okay. And one of the really interesting things about this deck, you actually have to win on your opponent's turn, right?
Yeah, your resets are dead on your turn, and it's tough. It's difficult to win. I actually originally had Turnabout. I actually cut the Turnabouts from the main deck because you want it to be as cheap as possible so you can be faster. You can win with like Snap and Snapcaster Mage, but it doesn't produce enough mana. But mostly you are relying on your opponent's turn like 99% of the time. I've yet to win on my own turn, and I imagine if I did a number of events with the deck, it might not ever come up.
All right. You mentioned Dig Through Time as like the card that maybe put this style of High Tide back over the top. Dig Through Time is basically your
Treasure Cruise.
Okay, sure. I mean, you're on the Dig Through Time side of the Dig versus Treasure Cruise spectrum. But in this deck, it's basically your Time Spiral, right? Like,
yeah,
it's the engine.
Yeah, the cards not in it that were really powerful that I lost were Merchant Scroll and Time Spiral, but they were basically replaced by Meditate and Dig Through Time. This deck is all about once you start comboing, you draw through your whole deck, and at the end of it, you should be able to Blue Sun or Brain Freeze for lethal.
Right. How has Dig Through Time been for you so far today?
It's been pretty good. I was able to, like a lot of times when I start the combo, I'll cast Dig Through Time, and I just need one piece. And if I don't get there with that, I'll get another draw spell, and I'm literally digging. It's a very appropriate name.
Fair. The other change that I have not seen in other High Tide lists, you have Snapcaster Mages. 3 Snapcaster Mage as well as 2 Snap.
I'm sorry.
So your deck has puns. They're built in. It's sweet. All right. So tell me a little about Snapcaster Mage in this deck. I mean, your deck is full of cheap spells. Like I can certainly see the appeal, but why don't you normally play this card in like the high tide, or sorry, in the time spiral versions? And what is it about this build that makes you want Snapcaster Mage?
I originally did this without any creatures at all. One of the perks of Spiral Tide is no creatures, their removal becomes dead. In this version, I originally did it without that, but I found that it was too slow. Snapcaster Mage and Snap, with appropriately named, you can increase the storm count really fast, and you can produce mana. Another thing that's very important is getting the second high tide to resolve as soon as possible, so your islands are tapping for 3. With Snapcaster Mage, it can be high tide number 2 much quicker, whereas with just 4 high tides in the deck, getting to the second one could take a lot longer.
Okay.
And that was one of the issues I had doing it previously. So I updated it with the Snapcaster Snap, and it's made it more consistent overall. It's a draw spell when you need it. It's a untap effect. It's a mana producer. It can even be another counter spell. I did flashback to Flush the Storm earlier with Storm of like 7 against a Infernal Tutor, and put my opponent into top deck mode because I just cast Snapcaster Mage, and I actually won 8 turns later with the combat step.
Just by attacking for 2 over and over?
I just drew counters, and that's not something I'm used to, but it was cool.
Sure. All right. Yeah, this deck actually seems pretty well equipped to do that, especially post-board. You have the 3 Snapcasters in the main deck, and then in your sideboard, you have a lot of 1-ofs. Of course, your Cunning Wish deck, so there are a lot of Cunning Wish targets. But then there at the bottom, you have 3 Vendilion Clique.
That is basically the slot. Counterbalance and Top in the other deck are really nice together. Counterbalance draws out Disruption. If it resolves, it can do even more work for you. In this deck, it's Vendilion Clique. Also, people don't see that coming. They attack with a creature. In response, I'll play Vendilion Clique, maybe get a Disruption spell out of your hand and block with it, and I get one of the creatures that I was worried about, especially if it's a Hate Bear, something that's preventing me from doing stuff like Gaddock Teague. And then if you just have one creature out, like if you block a Flip Delver and they have nothing else, you might have just bought yourself 4 turns. That can be relevant. So.
Sure. How many games have you won so far with combat?
Combat?
Yeah.
I can recall 1. I know I've won at least 1.
All right.
I might have won another one, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think just 1 was actual lethal combat to 0.
All right, fair enough.
I might have swung a couple times though, but
sure. You put a little pressure on. But 1 is, I think, like more than you normally get in a given tournament.
1 is more than I've done in a long time.
All right, fair enough. Well, as we mentioned earlier, this is the end of day 1. You are getting in with a 7-2 record.
Yeah, I was X1 going into the last round, and I lost to Death and Taxes because I messed up. I'm not used to combat, and they got me.
Fair enough. Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Good luck on day 2.
I will definitely be trying.
Stick around. We've got plenty more coverage coming of Grand Prix New Jersey.